Hi, I'm Alicia Davis, a television journalist based in New York, a city hit hard by COVID-19. That's why I'm so inspired by the Rotarians around the world who are working to help each and every community affected by this pandemic. Every mask sewn, meal delivered, and dollar raised adds up to real global impact. Now, more than ever, Rotary members are people of action. Let's take a look.
Hi everyone, we're in San Francisco, Chinatown.
Kisumu, Kenya.
Lisbon, Portugal.
Bay St. Louis, Mississippi.
San Diego, United States.
I'm Sadako Park, Setagayaku, Tokyo, Japan.
Almere in the Netherlands.
Tegucigalpa, Honduras.
Meaux, France.
Hello, namaste, Dr. Prakash Paudel of Nepal National Hospital.
Bucharest, Romania.
Professor Dr. Farhan Isa Abdullah, I'm in Pakistan.
Julia Koch and I'm from Milano, Italy.
We have started a hotline service through telephone regarding COVID cases.
So far, we help with more than 150 charities and hospitals. We also distribute more than 5 tons of food.
My club has given 52,000 tulips to thank our local healthcare professionals and gave a boost to their work and dedication.
So far, we have produced 10,000 face masks, 10 hand washing stations, and distributed to our local communities.
I'm helping with the food pantry, and we're also giving away these Rotary masks.
We are handing out masks to the homeless. We're also giving them boxed meals and bottles of water.
Medical facial masks, protective clothing kits, and goggles.
We partnered with our Rotary Exchange student to create Rotary Interactive Quarantine. Hundreds of students from more than 60 countries have met every 2 weeks to share their stories.
It provided our first-line personnel with personal protection equipment.
Also managed to buy meals and food for 2,000 elders in our community.
Redirected funds so that food insecure families and individuals' needs are met.
Provided food rations for families to survive for a month at least.
They have donated to 28 Italian hospitals a new technology aiming at breaking the infection chain in the hospital.
Being also able to mobilize communities, training them in personal care, and by providing them food items and things of the like.
We gave 40 tablets for sick people to keep in touch with their family via video. We help unemployed people to see opportunities and find new jobs.
This is Rotary connecting the world, saving lives, and this is Rotary in action.
Meeting of club number 2500 in District 6110. I found the following poem in the front of a cover of a book that Linda Bradshaw, our current board chair, loaned to me. I want to read it today. Why be a Rotarian? It's not for the money, it's not for fame, it's not for personal gain. It's for love of fellow man. It's just to lend a helping hand. It's just to give the tithe of self. That's something you can't buy with wealth. It's not the pins worn with pride. It's just for that feeling deep inside. It's that reward down in your heart. It's that feeling that you've been a part of helping others here and there to let them know how much you care. The author of that poem is unknown. Now I want to introduce our Rotarian of the day, who is Martin Keating.
Here, you got the wrong person. All right, Rotarians, listen up. Greetings from someone out of your past. That's right, I'm Sarge. Sarge from several moons ago. And I'm taking over this microphone. I own it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to you from deep within Turkey Mountain. Now about our speaker. Over his career, he has worn many hats, except this one. He's never worn this hat. Our guest's work history dates back to the early 1950s, when our dad ventured into a place under our home on 30th Street. A sign on the door read simply, Frank's Workshop, a place for odd jobs by a youngster. There were hundreds of boxes filled with knickknacks and other trivia. Dad was often a man of few words. He would replaced the hand-printed sign with one of his own. It read, "Septic Tank Frank, the plumber's friend." And you remember that, Frank. You do. I know you do. Frank grew up in Tulsa. Then there was Georgetown and OU Law. His 30-year career in law enforcement and public service included service as an FBI agent, U.S. attorney, and state prosecutor, as well as Oklahoma House and Senate member, including service as Republican Senate leader. Frank served Presidents Reagan and George H.W. Bush in the Treasury, Justice, and Housing departments. In 1993, he returned to Oklahoma to run for governor. He won a three-way race and was reelected for a second term. As governor of Oklahoma, Frank won national acclaim in 1995 for his compassionate and professional handling of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. He has continued to serve on national boards after he and Kathy returned to Oklahoma. They have 3 children and 11 grandchildren. Finally, Frank also is the author of 5 award-winning children's books, biographies of Will Rogers, Theodore Roosevelt, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Standing Bear, the Ponca Indian chief who argued Native Americans deserve the same rights as white Americans. I'm proud to present my brother, Frank Keating.
All right. Well, Martin, I'm very impressed, and thank you so much. And Paul and the members of this very special club, I've had an opportunity to speak or to attend. I used to refer to it as Downtown Rotary in Tulsa many, many times. What Martin didn't tell you, I did have the Frank's Workshop Company, and we didn't know much about what we were doing, but Mazeppa, Gaylord Sarton, ancient fame, and I would attempt to build things. But Martin had the Keating Experimental Laboratories in the basement of the main house, our home that we lived in, not the new addition that my basement was. And Dr. Lefebvre, who's a friend of Dad's, Dad wanted to show Dr. Lefebvre how fabulous Martin was as a scientific person. He had all of this experimental things in the basement, and Dr. Lefebvre went down and looked, came back up, and he said, "Tony, do you know what he's got down there?" And here's 12-year-old Martin or whatever. And he said, "No, I don't." He said he has enough explosive materials, sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, 5-gallon containers to blow up the house and the block. And of course, Keating Experimental Laboratory has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Yes, right away.
But I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody and share with them the issue of State Question 805. As I think a number of us know, State Question 805 is styled a criminal reform, penal reform measure. It is just the opposite of that. And for me, having been an FBI agent, been United States Attorney, supervised nationally the U.S. Secret Service, ATF, Customs, Marshals, Prisons, Interpol, and all 94 U.S. attorneys, including the criminal division, I do have a real focus on public safety and security. We passed a state question a few years ago that did something significant. Some of us may agree, some may disagree, but in this case, the District Attorneys Association, the sheriffs, the police associations, Mike Hunter, the Attorney General, and others, including the governor, are very much against it. And why is that? Well, the last state question that we passed in criminal justice basically reduced to a misdemeanor low-level property crimes and low-level drug crimes. And we can agree or disagree with that. That is a fact. That's in the Constitution. And as a result of that, our prison population has gone down 18%, which is very significant in the last 2 years. So what is 805? Well, 805 basically takes a lockbox, if you will, a little safe, and puts in it 52, quote, violent felonies. Those 52 violent felonies in the lockbox that will be in the Constitution if we pass this measure on November 3rd, those 52 crimes, violent crimes in the lockbox, can be enhanced. When I was in the DA's office in Tulsa, enhancement, adding after former conviction of a felony, was as a result of, in effect, a walking crime wave behavior pattern on the part of some criminal defendants. In my case, as an assistant DA, I put people on district attorney's probation, particularly young people, for a first offense where there was no, as Hannibal well knows, a district attorney's probation, but I did it anyway. Some kid that walked out without paying for his soda or whatever. Then if they got their grades up, if they went back to school, they behaved themselves, of course, we never filed on them. Then the next offense was a deferred sentence. No finding of guilt's made, and the case is passed and ultimately dismissed in a year or 6 months, whatever. Then the next offense, it could be another deferred sentence. The next offense, a suspended sentence, where obviously you have a conviction, but you don't go to jail. What am I saying? You had to work hard to go to prison. 5 felony convictions was not necessarily not the norm, but it was awfully close. So what 805 does to those lockbox 52 felonies, violent felonies, we would agree they should be enhanced. Examples: murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, kidnapping, armed robbery, large-scale drug trafficking. I'm not talking about possession with intent to distribute even cocaine or methamphetamines or heroin, but basic, huge dealers, quantities of drugs. Those are able to be enhanced. So if you're committing those kind of crimes over and over again, then the judge can pound you, or the jury, as the case may be. And if this offense, let's say, is 2 to 7 years, and after former conviction of a felony, the enhancement, the judge could, consistent with the law, send you down after a number of felonies for a much more lengthy time. Get you off the street, save all of us and our families the fear, the frustration, and the angst of a violent offender, a violent felony. So those are the lockbox crimes. Well, then what does 805 do? It doesn't do anything about low-level property crimes or low-level drug crimes. Why? They were already made misdemeanors in the state question a few years ago. How about the very violent? 805 doesn't touch them, because those 52 very violent crimes are covered in the enhancements that are permitted in state question 805. What's left? Nearly 600 felonies that the first offense is the first offense, the 5th offense is the first offense, the 10th offense is the first offense, the 50th offense is the first offense. Now, who figured this out? That walking crime waves, very dangerous people, are going to be permitted to commit violations 10, 15, 20 times, felonies, and they'll be punished as if it is the first offense. It is reckless public policy, reckless policy with respect to the protection of people who ought to be secure in their homes. Here are examples. Embezzlement, first offense, 15th offense. Identity theft, try that on in today's world. Witness tampering, cruelty to animals, that's usually a predicate offense for violent behavior against people. Incitement to riot. Repeat drunk drivers, again, the first offense is the same as the 50th offense or the 10th offense or the 20th offense. Trafficking in children is not in the lockbox. Soliciting sex from a minor while using a computer, not in the lockbox. Hate crimes, stalking, burglary of a home, animal cruelty, drug trafficking, drug distribution, possession of drugs with intent to distribute, except the most huge offenses, large quantities of drugs. Now, what fell out of 805? the people who are for it, and there's a lot of dark money coming in from all over the country. We have no money to go up on television. We're desperately trying to raise money now. They've got $3 million in the bank. Just roll it. All these ads. And by the way, one ad you've probably seen where they have 2 men and 2 women saying they never should have been in prison. Well, we checked out who those people were because they had their names. The 2 men and the 2 women. The 2 men, one has 8 felony convictions, one has 7. The 2 women, both of them have 9 felony convictions apiece. But let me go back to what's left out of the drop box and how people could be so reckless and so bad for the safety and the security of Oklahoma is beyond me. But every domestic violence offense is left out of the drop box, which means every domestic violence felony, first offense, 5th offense, 20th offense, exactly the same in terms of punishment, 4 years, and then maybe 1 and maybe 90 days, and you're out. Here's a letter, a note that I got, actually, Kim Garrett, who's on the Palomar board. Palomar is a very important domestic violence organization, full circle organization in Oklahoma City. And this came, oops, let me get this up. To Kim Garrett, who's in charge of Palomar. Quote, I have signs in my yard, and last night at 7:45 p.m., I had a knock at the door. This is Kim Garrett, in charge of Palomar, the domestic violence shelter and center in Oklahoma City. A young lady was holding a baby and standing on my doorstep. She had left her car in the middle of the street with the door ajar. The lady was literally shaking and had trouble in expressing her needs. As I calmed her down, she asked for 2 yard signs so she could make sure people knew of no on 805. The lady told me her story of domestic violence through strangulation, a felony, but first offense, 50th offense doesn't matter. Domestic violence in the presence of a child, and how Palomar had been her retreat and support every week for a lengthy period of time. She wanted to thank us for leading the charge on no on 805 and how important it is for us to make sure that yes does not happen. Well, let me mention what fell out of the drop box in addition to what I mentioned to you. As of 1/1/20, violent felonies are cemented in. Well, the state of Oklahoma passed a number, the legislature did, of domestic violence crimes during this year. None of them are in the drop box. They'll be excluded from the drop box, which means it's always a first offense. Examples: domestic abuse by strangulation, domestic assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, domestic assault and battery with a deadly weapon, domestic violence in the presence of a child, domestic violence on a pregnant woman. Now, what do those people who are in favor of this wretched potential constitutional amendment say about that? They say, oh, the legislature can fix it. Wrong. It's in the Constitution that the first offense and the 50th offense are the same thing. You cannot enhance those nearly 600 felonies that fell out of the drop box. Now, could the legislature go back and say, okay, home burglary is 2 to 7 years. Okay, we'll pass a law that says it's 2 to 25 years. Yeah, they could do that. But why, if somebody burns down my barn, should I pay for the firemen and for the insurance and for what was done to me? Who in the world would take nearly 600 serious felony crimes and say, oh, that's okay, there'll always be first offenses? For me as a prosecutor, always a first offense, and I only can punish them in a very narrow range when they are walking crime waves, house burglars, animal cruelty, violation of protective orders, drug traffickers, and the domestic abuse. Those individuals ought to be enhanced, and it's in the Constitution. It cannot be touched, and the only way you'll touch it is to have another initiative petition, another process that we've gone through, and then another need for millions of dollars to pass it or to defeat it. Why people are so reckless as to say the governor and the legislature can't fix this, they can fix this, and they should. That's why we pay them. In my judgment, this State Question 805 is the worst piece of quote reform legislation that I have ever seen, and to put our families at risk, because people who are serial offenders, crime waves, they will never be able to be enhanced. Nearly 600 serious felonies, car thieves, forgers, embezzlers, these individuals, as well as violent domestic abusers, will always be first-time offenders. So I would hope that everybody would vote no and let the legislature and the governor, as they have been doing, continue reducing the number of nonviolent and low-level property offenders from prison. Something that we've done, reduce the population in the last 2 years by 18%, but not this. Matter of fact, today I got a note from the Oklahoma Corrections Department, and this is, I think, good news. It says we've had a slight uptick in the number of people incarcerated. Today, 65% are violent. A slight uptick, but the recidivism rate is going down. Why? Because the career criminals are going to spend time in prison. Anybody who's a career criminal should not get out and do what they've been doing over and over and over and over again. And that will occur if we pass State Question 805. So I would encourage everybody to vote no. And if you're interested, we have these little push cards, but if you're interested, no805.org is our website. And Mike Hunter has done a lot of work, his office, the DA's Association, their office, making the points that I've made, and it's on our website if you're interested in more information. But on that note, I'll pause for comments or questions, and happy to attempt to answer them.
Thank you, Governor Keating. I did ask everybody, if you have a question, to put it in the chat, and I'll see what I can find of the questions there and ask as they come. Rob Berry had a question for you, Governor Keating, of who's actually pushing 805, where's the dark money coming from, and why are they pushing it?
Well, I wish I knew. They have seven figures, they have unlimited money. We're told it's Zuckerberg. We're told that, Chris Steele here in Oklahoma is very, very much involved in, but where this money is coming from is to me rather scary, because there is a lot of it. And the TV has been pretty well bought up, and you'll see other people like those four that we had before, who are the kind of individuals that needed to have some hot time in prison. I don't know how we could tolerate, 7, 8, 9 felony convictions. And for those of us who've been in law enforcement, in the arrest business, and the federal prison system reported to me, and the prosecution business, I hate to say it, but there are a lot of very bad people out there. And the governor's chief of staff, for example, Paul Von Payne, he and his wife about 3 weeks ago, I live fairly near them here in Oklahoma City, and Bon and his wife were asleep in their bedroom, and somebody came through the doggy door, stole his wallet, stole her purse, and then decided to go back into the bedroom to see if they could find anything back there. Of course, Bon and his wife were asleep. They are not light sleepers, and they didn't wake up. Person stole a lot of her jewelry and then fled. I'm a very light sleeper. I would wake up, and what would happen to me? Probably a very bad thing. A burglar who is aggressive enough to come into your bedroom in the middle of the night is aggressive enough and dangerous enough to hurt you badly or kill you. I'm just saying, for those career criminals, we have to make sure that they are not treated like first-time offenders. We've taken care of those people. But I would like to know, Paul, where this money's coming from. The only thing we are told is it's Zuckerberg and people like that want to see a lot of fundamental. How about Colin Kaepernick? He said yesterday, the professional football player, he said yesterday it's his agenda and his organization to abolish all jails and all prisons. Well, maybe they're sending some money to Oklahoma. But I tell you, for those of us who have handled very bad people in court and in prison and arrested them, don't take a minute thinking about, well, you know, these people are not so bad. I mean, the ones I dealt with were very bad, and those that are career criminals are very bad.
Thank you. We had a question regarding, what do you say to the argument that this bill is just a lack of legislative action to take care of criminal reform?
Well, I think that there is no question if you tried this in the legislature, it wouldn't pass. Why? Because even though there are a lot of us who are reform focused, who would say that domestic violence offenders first time should be 5th time, 10th time, 20th time, burglars, embezzlers, people who steal, people who forge checks, the rest of them. The legislature, as a result of what the state question was passed previously, that did make low-level property crimes and drug crimes misdemeanors. I think that was probably the right thing to do. The legislature was starting under Stitt, who told me this yesterday. Zone 2, is there anything more we should do? And when this started, 805 started, they just pulled back. I mean, because whatever they did would be swallowed up by the Constitution. The Constitution would repel it. They couldn't do anything. So what we have to do is defeat 805 and then put pressure on the House and Senate members and the governor to take another hard look at the statute book and see what we should or shouldn't do in terms of punishment.
We had a similar question. Once something's in the Oklahoma Constitution, what's the process for making changes to unintended consequences that might occur? So can the legislator achieve the same exact goals if they wanted to without adopting this into our Constitution?
Well, yeah, I mean, the truth is all of this in our Constitution would be bad, as I've argued. But, you know, in 2000, I was the architect of right to work in Oklahoma. And I went to see Ed Gaylord and I told him that I was anxious that we put it in the Constitution and not the statute. And he had the right to work people sitting in his office. And he said, well, why do you say that? These guys want it to be in the statute books, not the Constitution. I said, yeah, because they want to come back every year and hit you up for money so that they can, quote, fight not to have right to work defeated in Oklahoma. We then had a Democrat legislature. The unions hated right to work. The next year, if we hadn't put it in the Constitution, it would be repealed. That is a fact. The legislature would have repealed it. Now, as a Republican legislature, that would not happen. But why did I put it in the Constitution? Because it would never be repealed. It would stay there forever. Think about this. Martin and I are Catholics. The Oklahoma Constitution still has the Blaine Amendment in it. What is the Blaine Amendment? A venomously anti-Catholic constitutional amendment that was pushed in all the new legislatures and the legislatures about the turn of the century. It was one of the first things put in our Constitution. It said, you know, no money for any secular or sectarian schools or anything, which would mean St. Francis and St. John couldn't provide Medicare or Medicaid services. Well, fortunately, the courts have knocked that, but the Blaine Amendment still is in the Constitution. So I'm just saying it is very, very difficult to get something out of the Constitution. If this gets in there, yeah, I think the law enforcement community will die at the number of people crawling through your windows at night, stealing your car and trying to steal your jewelry like the Bon Payne's home. But still, once it's in the Constitution, very difficult. You have to have an initiative petition. You have to raise a lot of money. You know, you have court cases and the rest of it. Hopefully that won't happen.
What types of legislation do you think our current legislator might support to further reduce prison populations right now?
Well, you know, an 18% reduction is pretty darn good, to say the least. What other offenses? If I saw larceny of merchandise from a retailer overdrawn checks, those kind of first or second offenses in prison, you ought to wear an ankle bracelet. You ought to, like what happened over here, we had a mini riot during the protests. And there was a guy that spray painted the Oklahoma City National Memorial and broke a window. Instead of putting him in prison, the district attorney, I think rightly so, made him clean it up and work at the memorial for 3 months. And I think that's educational, but that takes leadership from you all to tell the legislature what they want, what you all want or don't want. But to put in the Constitution 52 violent crimes that can be enhanced, and keeping out of the Constitution nearly 600 crimes, I read them to you, that are very serious, that can't be enhanced, a first offense for all time. The criminal class will be laughing all the way to the bank. And and there are such people out there, and I think it would be horrible for us to do it.
I'll ask one more question. This is an interesting question for you, but if you say you don't want to answer, I'll understand. Somebody's asking who you think the next president will be of the United States.
Joe Biden. And I'm gonna vote for Trump. But I think, God love Trump, he is hard to like, and he's done a lot of very good things. But I think Biden, people are just, I'm not sure they can take 4 more years of Trump's personality. But I'm still hopeful we can get Trump with a different personality and not run everybody off. I mean, he is hard to like, but I mean, going after China like he has, I think is absolutely the right thing to do. And he's just done a lot of stuff like that. The economy was roaring because of regulation and reductions and all that stuff. And I was in DC running the trade association for the life insurance industry and the banks under President Obama. And gosh, a lot of the reach of regulation just killed community banks. We were losing small banks 1 a day at the end of that era, and that's not good. So, at any rate, I think a lot of people, particularly women and millennials, are probably going to join the Biden team.
Thank you, Governor Keating. On behalf of everybody here, I want to say thank you for joining us today and taking time to speak with us. A book recognizing today's program will be presented to our partners in education school, Celia Clinton Elementary. This week's book is actually George Washington, Our Founding Father by Frank Keating.
Well, listen, and Paul, let me mention one thing. Martin, Kathy and I wrote a book on the Oklahoma City bombing that came out for children recently. And then my 7th children's book for Simon & Schuster in that genre, if you will, is Hamilton. No great surprise. Hamilton's in now, and all the proceeds from, like Washington, they all go to Mount Vernon. But it's just a joy to be a children's book author. I do all my own research and writing, and I'm very grateful that you all would give a copy of that book to one of the elementary schools.
You bet. Thank you again for joining us. It's great to see you again. It's also good to see our own Martin Sarge Keating. Thank you both.
Well, yeah, thank you, Sarge. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Sure.
It's now time for our inspirational moment from Daniel Gomez. I'll turn it over to Daniel. Daniel.
Thanks, President Paul. Today, I just wanted to talk about, Election Day is just a few weeks away. And I want to talk a little bit about the importance of exercising this right, fundamental right to vote. So this year is a presidential election, which obviously will draw a lot of attention, but I like to focus on local elections, which have a much larger effect on our daily lives here in Tulsa. And we have a strong slate of local leaders and candidates and several important races to consider. Some of these candidates are actually part of our club. And as community leaders, I think we have a responsibility to vote and to know our local candidates and our leaders. A few things come to my mind when I think of the importance of local elections. I'm an avid podcast listener, and one of my favorites is a series from Radiolab. It's called More Perfect. It focuses on several landmark decisions from the U.S. Supreme Court, and it goes into details surrounding these cases. One episode opens by describing an interview with Chief Justice Earl Warren, who served on the court from 1953 to 1969. His tenure encompassed a large part of the civil rights era, and he presided over many important cases like Brown versus Board of Education, which integrated our schools, Miranda versus Arizona, which requires police officers to explain to arrestees their constitutional rights, and Loving versus Virginia, which struck down bans on interracial marriage. However, after his retirement, when he was asked what he considered to be the most important case of his tenure, he did not mention any of these cases, but instead he mentioned Baker versus Carr, a 1962 case concerning redistricting and its effect on local and state elections. The case is best known for the standard being one person, one vote. Between 1900 and 1960, population had shifted from rural areas to the cities, but many districts had not been withdrawn or redrawn. That meant that people in rural areas had a stronger say in local and state politics than those who lived in the city. It turns out that that case was one of the most difficult questions the court had ever faced. The justices could not agree, and the case took 2 years to decide. One justice, Charles Whitaker, simply could not make a decision and suffered a nervous breakdown. He had to recuse himself from the case and retired shortly thereafter. For the Chief Justice to call this the most important case of his tenure, and having led to a breakdown by one of the justices, it shows just how important it is to appreciate our right to vote in local elections. So as community leaders, I think Rotarians, we play an important role, not only in voting, but in knowing our local candidates and in working with our local leaders. I'm inspired by people who run for office, including those in our club. I thank those who run for local office for accepting the enormous responsibility, and I think we can all appreciate their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for that inspirational moment, helping us remind us to please take our time to vote when it comes time. Special thanks to this week's sponsors, Weeby Trees, Tim Knoll, Corporate Realty Advisors, Carl Vincent and Bree Segovia. We have some outstanding programs coming up next month, so please join us for November 4th. Tulsa Police Chief Wendell Franklin will join us. November 10th, Senator Jim Inhofe. November 18th, author Jim Stovall. Polio eradication will be one of the history's greatest public achievements, with polio following smallpox to become only the second human disease eradicated from the world. Now we have a special polio presentation.
It was the spring of 1949. A young 22-year-old wife and mother was faced with the alarming prospect of losing her entire family. She was a pastor's wife, and her 28-year-old husband and her 2.5-year-old son were both 60 miles from home in a hospital in Abilene, Texas, diagnosed with polio. The prognosis was not good. Neither was expected to live. In addition, her second son, at the age of 6 months, was fighting pneumonia. That young woman, like so many others of her generation, would not quit when circumstances seemed bleak. She made multiple road trips each week between the hospital in Abilene and her home in Haskell, where the younger son was being cared for by her sister. As weary as she was, she would not give in to what she considered the ultimate defeat. The husband and the older son both had bulbar polio, and she was told it would likely prove fatal when it reached the brain. As the story was told to me, the young pastor had a near-death experience and remembered walking up a massive marble staircase toward the most brilliant and peaceful light he had ever seen when he was suddenly back in his hospital bed. Doctors were astounded when, by nothing short of a miracle, both the young pastor and the 2.5-year-old son survived. That pastor was my dad. That courageous young woman was my mom. Doctors told her that I would live with the right side of my face paralyzed for the rest of my life. I would never smile with the right side of my mouth. I would be required to manually close my right eye when it was time to sleep. That eye would never blink or wink. Once again, my mother, against all practicality, stood up to the odds and began looking for the next miracle. She found Dr. Hazel Robinson in our little town of Haskell, Texas. Over the course of the next 6 months, that chiropractic angel eliminated every effect of the paralysis that I was supposed to carry for the rest of my life. I could have been another story like so many others who lived and died in iron lungs over the course of 60 years, but I was not. From the time I was old enough to understand my own story, I have considered every single day of my life as a miracle that required me to find ways to give back. I've never had to suffer through or even encounter the residual effects of polio until I began traveling overseas as an adult and saw the devastation that so many of the world's people endure. As a young polio survivor, all I had to do was run across the yard, and I believed in miracles. My ability to breathe outside of an iron lung was a miracle. Every time I smiled with both sides of my mouth, I knew what a miracle felt like. And to this day, if I pass you in a crowded room or hallway, I may not say anything, I might not wave, but if I smile and wink at you, I guarantee you I'm relishing my miracle.
We are this close.
We're this close.
We are this close.
Of wanting
To making history.
This close to changing the world.
We're this close.
This close. This close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease
ever again.
This close. We are this close to ending polio.
Ending polio.
All we need is you.
This close.
If we donate now, we may lose this chance forever. Help Rotary make history at endpolionow.org.
Polio eradication truly is life-changing, and I want to thank our own Corey for sharing his story. This Saturday, October 24th, we will celebrate World Polio Day. Rotarians take action to eradicate a disease forever by making a donation. Every donation made to Rotary to end polio will be tripled thanks to a 2-to-1 match from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So donate today at endpolio.org/donate. Your gift will truly make history. Our Shop with a Cop committee has a committee meeting immediately following our meeting today at 1:10 p.m. The Zoom link's in the Monday message, or you can email Tina Miller and she can send the link directly to you to join that meeting. Now it's time for Sarge. Carl Vincent. Sarge, are you there?
Well, President Paul, did you see Martin Keating was on this call? Martin Keating's my hero.
Yep.
I'm going to be like him when I grow up. President Paul, welcome to another episode of Rotary Jeopardy. I don't know if you remember or not, President Paul, but last week you were having some difficulty picking categories, and we went through the whole remedial presidential effort here. So this time, just real simple. We're going to flash some categories up here. You just need to pick just one category there for us, please.
I'll take article for $500, please.
That's a good choice, President. You know, I think Martin Keating being on this call has probably improved your capacity to be president. This first find comes from one of our own, someone who's concerned about botany but is no wallflower, John Baumgartner. John made a contribution to the Tulsa Botanical Gardens for a water feature. And when we saw the article in the Tulsa World, contacted him and he kindly made another contribution to our foundation in recognition of the Tulsa Botanical Gardens. John is a generous member of the Tulsa community and the Rotary community, and we're so grateful for that, John. We look forward to seeing how that water feature turns out. And John wanted to invite everyone to come and see it when it's completed real soon. Now, President Paul, we're going to come back to you. This is another opportunity to redeem yourself with this next screen. Just pick, I'll give you a hint. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month this month, President Paul. Maybe you'll see a category there for the Jeopardy board that would appeal to you for the next selection.
I'll try the Breast Cancer Awareness Month category for $300 then.
That's a brilliant selection, President Paul. Very, very good. I don't know how you came up with that. It's divination, I tell you. But anyway, we just sent out a note to folks and said, hey, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Would you care to contribute in honor of that? And so my good friend Andrea Nielsen, who's there on the left in the upper picture, made a contribution and invited me to match it in memory of my late wife, Rhonda, who's in both of these pictures. She's the center one at the top picture, and there next to me and my girls. In 2008, this was pre-cancer for her, and she was a 7-year survivor. So certainly grateful for that, Andrea. Thank you. And then we've got some other folks that we'd like to recognize there. Past President Becky Fields was actually featured in U.S. News and World Report. She was diagnosed with breast cancer and talked about it with the national media, and she gave $100 in recognition as a survivor to honor her caregivers and the amazing staff at Cancer Treatment Centers of America. I know they do a fabulous job. I've heard that story from others. And then with past President Becky in mind, Lane Dolly did another fine for $50 to honor the perseverance and fighting spirit of breast cancer survivors Becky Field and Katie Johnson. So again, thank you, Lane, for that. Our own past president, Matt Davis, chipped in $50 in memory of Joan Inhofe Johnson, his mother's beloved little sister. Matt, thank you for that. And then President Paul, thank you for your contribution here in memory of your mom, Margaret Davis, and your grandmother-in-law, Eileen Madison. President Paul, it's a very appropriate gift. There's some statistics here on this next screen about breast cancer and how it affects so many of us. 1 in 8 women will have it. It's a 42% higher mortality in African-American women than white women. It's the most common cancer among Hispanic and Latina women and the leading cause of cancer death. So thanks to all of you who contributed to the Rotary Foundation in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. President Paul, there's not a category for our next fine and Rotarian because he's just so generous. I'm constantly awestruck by Scott Philstrip, and he's made a gift that we have to take seriously, I think. He's contributed $5,000 for the purpose of improving our club's communication with members over 60 years of age. Now, I don't know if you looked at the bottom of the screen today during our call, President Paul, but there were 71 people who participated in this call, which was better than we've had. But a lot of the people not on that call, we have 250 people that usually attend lunches to 300. A lot of people on that call are members who are not comfortable with Zoom. And unlike Martin Keating, who executed the diligence to figure it out and get unmuted, they just have not gotten involved. And so Scott gave us money to help us find ways to get them more involved. And Scott, I want to assure you that Rotary leadership takes that seriously, and we're already exploring some ways to do that thanks to your generous gift. Folks, here we are coming up on the end of October. Another Rotary month has gone by. Matt Bristow is still beating the pants off of me in terms of funds raised. Martin Keating is still beating the pants off of me in terms of personality. So please, if you can help me do a little better with some fines, send us an email, sarge@tulsarotary.com. Thank you, President Paul.
Thank you, Sarge Carl. Appreciate the work you're doing, and especially raising money for breast cancer awareness. And also I want to thank Scott for his generous donation and everybody else who gave funds also this month. Thank you very much. In closing, the following excerpt is contained in the introduction of A Century of Service, the story of Rotary International. The Rotary River is wide and runs deep. No one can know where its journey will take it, but all who gaze on the waters can be proud of its source. It grows ever stronger because it offers men and women something they yearn for: the desire to help others, the determination to make a difference. Thank you for being a part of our great club. Please invite a guest to join us for an upcoming meeting. Have a great week, and with that, we're adjourned.